Thanks for joining me again as I continue the Real Estate Roadmap Podcast Foundation series. I'm your host, Matt Jones, and this week we're going to dive into the lowest barrier of entry method of real estate investing. There's a term called house hacking. I think it was coined by Bigger Pockets, and there are several variations or different ways that you can house hack. So we're going to really dig into those and kind of unpack the different strategies of house hacking. Stay tuned. A shortage of investable capital, i.e. a lack of funding, and analysis paralysis, or always looking for more information instead of taking action, seem to be the two top barriers to entry when people want to invest in real estate. So the Real Estate Foundation series that we're in is we're trying to tackle the latter, but house hacking specifically is targeting the former, right? You don't need as many assets to be able to get in and house hack. So that's where we're going to get started. I see a surprising amount of disagreement over what house hacking is and what qualifies as house hacking. But so I'm going to start out by defining it. In my definition, house hacking is using your personal residence in any way to advance your real estate investing career. You're using it at your personal residence as a springboard to accelerate your path into real estate investing. It doesn't matter about any specific numbers. We're not here to gatekeep real estate investing with crazy anything, right? If you're using your personal residence to further your real estate investing career, you are, in my eyes, house hacking. It's that simple and it's that easy. As a real estate agent, house hacking is one of the most common and popular strategies that I see. I'm here in the Pensacola, Florida area where we have a large Navy base, large military presence. So it's super popular here with VA buyers and the VA loan. But don't worry if that doesn't apply to you, because it also works with conventional loans and it works with FHA loans. Typically, loan terms are much more attractive and down payment requirements are much lower on owner-occupied loans, which is one of the things that makes house hacking so powerful. So what are some house hacking strategies that you can use along your path to real estate investing success? The first one would be simply renting out rooms in a house that you own, right? You live there, you're going to have a place to live anyway, so you rent out some rooms, they offset your living expense or maybe eliminate it altogether if you have enough rental income from those rooms that you're renting out. This is one that I actually utilized from the time I bought my first home at 23, more or less until the time that I got married. I wish that I could say that I had house hacked to advance my real estate investing career, but really I used it to be able to invest in my 401k prior to being in real estate and still have free money to go out and enjoy myself in my 20s. But it was a great strategy for me. It meant I was able to live without taking on debt and still invest for my future. Now, when you rent out rooms in your home, you can do it more than one way. And this is really so important with real estate. There are typically many ways that you can apply various strategies. So I rented out a room to, a friend or someone I knew, typically on a long-term basis, right? They brought their own furniture. I just rented the empty room and I paid for the utilities. They just paid into the larger pot that was our household expenses. You can also rent short-term. So really that's kind of how I think Airbnb started, was renting out space in your home. There are some places where you're not allowed to do short-term rentals unless you live there. So you can do long-term rentals, you can do short-term rentals. You can also do what we're defining as medium-term rentals, which is places like Furnished Finder. It's popular with traveling nurses or people who are coming in and they want to rent a space for several months at a time, but they'd like for that space to be furnished and they don't want to be tied into a long lease. So medium-term rentals are also a great fit for house hacking. You could also buy a multifamily property and live in one unit and rent out the other units. Again, there's opportunity for combining here because you can rent out those other units long, short, or medium term. You can also rent out those other units and rent any extra units in the unit you live in. You really want to accelerate your progress into real estate investing. that's a big springboard right there. This is actually the strategy that I used to quit my job. My regular job prior to getting into real estate investing and being a real estate agent. So I bought a quadplex and I did the BRRRR strategy. I renovated it completely. I moved into the first unit that was livable, and because it was completely vacant when I bought it, total fixer-upper, just a disaster of a place. But I moved into the first unit that was livable. Then we fixed the next one. I rented it out. We fixed the next one, and eventually I had a $1,000 mortgage, and I had 3 tenants paying $700 a month. So they were paying my mortgage plus $1,100 over that. I was then able to refinance, pull my money out, which gave me some capital to live on because I was quitting my job, but also to invest in future real estate deals. So there I combined house hacking and multifamily and the BRRRR strategy, and it was just so powerful for me. Now, somewhere between single family and multifamily properties are properties that would be considered single family, but they come with an ADU. Now, what is an ADU? It stands for accessory dwelling unit. For years, people referred to these as a mother-in-law suite, but it could be a apartment over a garage. It's really any other structure that's on the property that you're able to rent out. So those are sometimes a little bit harder to find. Not everybody understands the value in them, and they're not always advertised extremely well. But if you're struggling, like in our area where there's very little multifamily inventory, but you do want a second source of income in the property that you buy, looking for something with detached livable square footage like an ADU, excellent strategy, and definitely something that you should consider. Another house hacking strategy is when it comes time for you to move, instead of selling your house, just keep it. You probably got into your house with a fairly low down payment method, so you don't have a ton of cash invested. Not always true, but frequently true, which means that your cash on cash returns renting it could potentially be higher because you don't have a lot of cash in it. But that's really only part of the strategy. The powerful thing about this is you get to keep what you have, and because you're going to live in something else, you can then do a low down payment owner-occupied loan to buy your next property. Whereas if you stayed in your current property and you went to buy an investment-only property, you probably, there's a great chance you'd have to put down 20 or 25%, depending on the situation. Now, second homes are a good way to only have to put down 10 in some cases, but as far as money out of pocket, keeping the home you live in as a rental and then buying another one for yourself can be a really powerful strategy to let you buy property before you have a ton of capital, or even if you just don't want to, you have the capital and you don't want to use it. I mentioned that here in Pensacola, we've got a big military presence. NAS Pensacola is a large base, and anybody who flies for the Navy at some point comes through NAS Pensacola, which is kind of a cool thing we enjoy here. So I've gotten to work with a lot of military men and women, and I really appreciate that. And one of the cool things I enjoy helping them with is they go out and they buy a different property at each duty station. So they get transferred here to NAS Pensacola, for example. I've got a client who bought something fairly close to the base in Pensacola, and then they were transferred to Whiting Field in Milton, which is only about half an hour away, maybe 40 minutes, but it was enough that they were able to buy a second property there, again, using their VA loan, again, 0% down. So at this point, you've got 2 properties because you've been stationed at 2 different places, and then they were transferred to, and from there, people can go a lot of places, but for one example, you might go to Texas, and in Texas, you buy a place there, and even if you've used your VA eligibility and say you put 5% down on a conventional loan, well, you've now got 3 properties with 0% down, 0% down, and 5% down. And, if you were able to buy multifamily, for example, you could have 5 or 10 doors just in a couple transactions. And that can happen in 1 or 2 years because of, how often people can get transferred around, especially before they get really into more of their career phase and they're doing a lot of training. the military can send you all over the place. So very powerful strategy for anyone who can do VA loan, or really just anybody who gets transferred around for their job. Now, the strategy of keeping your home when you're done with it and using it as a rental property does have some shortcomings or pitfalls. The first one I want to talk about, a lot of people don't think about, but it's a real thing. Most people, when they live in a home, they get a little bit attached to that home. It feels like home. It's not just some place you bought as an investment and you only see the black and white, you only see the numbers. So if a tenant comes in and trashes your home, you're going to probably take that harder than if it was a rental property that was always a rental property and you bought it, and you've been putting money toward CapEx and money toward vacancy, and you're ready for it financially. It still stinks when somebody trashes your home. But if you've lived there, it brings kind of a whole different stress to it. The other thing, sometimes if it's a home you live in, you may have higher end finishes. So if, I'm currently standing in one of our rentals and it has laminate countertops. That's fine. It's a nice rental, but they're nice laminate countertops. That's all it needs. If these got broken, it would be easy enough for me to go spend about $600 for materials to replace them. Now, at our home, if we were to, and we're probably going to look for another home, and we've discussed, do we want to keep the one that we're in as a rental? Well, we have quartz countertops there. If those got broken, there's probably $4,000 or $5,000. So it's a huge difference because we have some higher end finishes. Same thing, we did a bathroom remodel there that we would not do in a rental. So do take inventory of the property itself. Would it make a good rental? Okay. The other thing here is if you know at the outset that you want to keep that house as a rental when you move out of it one day, run your numbers on the front end. You want to make sure it's going to be a good rental property before you buy it if you know that that's the end goal, especially if you know that you're going to try to turn and move after a year or two. Okay. If you're going to be there a decade, then do some things. Do some things that you're going to enjoy. But if you know you're going to keep it as a rental, and that's always the plan, run your numbers up front and don't buy something that's not going to be a good investment as a rental. Okay, another house hacking strategy would be to buy a fixer-upper, fix it up, live there for 2 years, and then sell it. Why 2 years? Well, after 2 years, you are exempt from the first $250,000 in profit on a property as a single person, or $500 as a married couple. I'm not an accountant. Check with your accountant and be sure, if you're listening to this some point in the future, that you make sure those numbers still hold. But as of today, that is a huge thing. $250,000 or $500,000 tax-free would be enormous for most people. So that is a really wonderful benefit. It's referred to as a live-in flip. Some people would not categorize it as house hacking. I absolutely would. You've used probably a low down payment owner-occupied loan to get into it. You're benefiting from living there in the in the fact that you're going to save on those taxes. I plan to do that every 2 years. When I first was buying my first house and getting into wanting to invest in real estate, I thought, man, I'm going to do this and probably not make several $100,000 every time, but I'm going to do this and cash out every 2 years, and I'll have that tax-free money, and then I'll go on and do it again. Now, as some of you listening or watching probably are well aware, having a family can change the amount of inconvenience that you're willing to tolerate. So I'm not currently moving every 2 years to maximize my taxable gains, but it's a strategy that's out there. I've actually got a client who has moved over 40 times. He's been married well over 40 years, and he's moved over 40 times. And all of that was because the majority, they've relocated areas, but so many of those moves were because they bought a house that was a good deal, they made it a little bit nicer, and then they moved. And so he didn't always utilize his tax advantage, but he did utilize the fact that he could get in live there, increase the value, and move and do it again. Wash, rinse, repeat over and over and over for 40 plus years. So personally, I have used most of these house hacking strategies. House hacking is just such a great springboard. And don't forget, when you're thinking about house hacking, that you can combine different methods to really maximize the outcome. Now, maximizing, the financial outcome isn't always the goal, right? You have to make it work for your situation. If you are single and social and you want to live in a duplex and rent out the extra rooms in yours and rent out the other unit and just go, get the biggest financial benefit you can, awesome. If you are, if you're an introvert and you don't want anybody in your space, you don't want a neighbor next to you, you maybe want to try one of the other house hacking strategies. If you got a family and your spouse says, no, we're not moving people in next door with the kids and all this other stuff, that's fine. There's still strategies out there for you. So use the one that fits. But if your goal is to get the biggest springboard from where you are into real estate investing success, don't forget to consider combining some of the different ways of house hacking. Okay, a step-by-step guide for house hacking and kind of my top tips if you're wanting to get into this are, okay, first, find a good real estate agent who's familiar with real estate investing, they're familiar with working with investors, even first-time investors, and they can guide you through the process. How would you find a good real estate agent? Well, other investors are a great source. So if you're plugged into any investment groups, wherever it is you intend to invest, asking people there can be a great fit. Social media can be a good fit. Sometimes, if all else fails and you need some help, I have a pretty big network, specifically with people that work with investors. So reach out to me, let me know where you are and your goals, and I'll do my best to connect you with somebody who would be a great fit. Okay, second, get your finances in order and get pre-approved for a mortgage. Your lender should be able to help you understand, based on your situation and what's available to you, what the best type of loan is, how much you can expect to spend out of pocket, and for a down payment and your closing cost. If you need to be connected to a good lender, your real estate agent should be a great source for that. Okay, next, you're going to want to work with your agent and your lender to some degree to set up a home search criteria. Now, you need to know what your goals are, and you need to know what loan types are available to you. And from there, you should try to narrow down your search for highlighting the homes that might fit that. So you need to know, do you want something that's turnkey? And do you, or alternatively, do you want something that would qualify for your loan type, but leaves a lot of room for you to go in and make improvements and do some value add, right? Maybe you're getting a better deal because something still looks like it's in the 70s, but everything's functional. You can go to a loan on it, and then you can spend your time making it nicer, and that way, when you're done with it, you've increased the value. So do you want turnkey? Do you want value add? Do you want single family? Do you want multifamily? Based on the inventory in your area, do you want to try to find something with an ADU, right? We talked about those. Price, area, size, and features are the things that should be included in your home search. And be sure that you separate your nice to haves, your I would like to haves, from the must have, right? You must have something that will qualify for the type of loan that you're able to get. You want, stainless steel appliances or granite countertops or whatever it is. So separate those two and leave the search wide enough that it'll pick up anything that meets the must-haves, and then you can look at each listing to figure out if it has enough of the would like to haves. Next, you want to run the numbers on any property that you think might be a good fit. To some degree, you just need practice running the numbers, but so it doesn't have to be one that you are so excited about you want to make an offer on. You really want to run them on anything that looks like it would fit. And then you want to have your agent, if they're real savvy with investments, or maybe another investor, look at your numbers and give you some feedback. Are you in the right ballpark on your numbers? Now, you can run your numbers based on what the financials are going to look like when you live there, and that's great. That tells you kind of how much of your housing cost you're able to offset. What really matters, though, and what I encourage you to focus most on, is what are the numbers going to be like once you move out? If you're not going to be there but 1 or 2 years, that's pretty short time in the life of most real estate investments. So what do the numbers look like when it's fully occupied by tenants? That's the numbers you want to know. I want to take a minute to kind of make a side note here. If you analyze most homes listed in the MLS, the numbers are going to stink. And that makes sense if you think about it, right? If the numbers on everything were good, then investors would just keep going out there and buying them, which would push the prices up until the numbers weren't good. So what you're looking for is kind of a diamond in the rough. You're looking for a good opportunity. You're looking for something where you can make it work. But understand, 8 out of 10 homes that you see listed are probably going to make a bad rental at their asking price. Now, if you need help with your numbers, be sure and check out my bonus episode on how I run my numbers for a house hack. Okay, while you're at the home or your agent's there on your behalf, be sure and check the ages of the major systems. Does the home appear well maintained? Are there immediate repairs needed, or is it going to qualify for the type of financing that you're able to use? Those are all things you'll want to look at while you're there. If your agent's an investor, be sure and ask them what they look for, right? Their insight into what they're looking at can be very helpful, and it might be very different from what you see when you first walk through a home. Okay, from here, you'll work with your agent to get a home under contract. I'm not going to go too far into that because it just varies by location, and we're going to tackle it in other episodes and when we talk to investors about their experience and some case studies. But this is so once you get a property under contract, what I want to point out here is that many people that are house hacking self-manage, especially if you're going to rent out rooms in a house that you live in. There's not a lot of property managers that do that. So if you're going to self-manage, take some time before you get too far down the road, at the latest when you've got something under contract, and get familiar with your landlord-tenant laws for the area that you're in. Why? Because on the day of closing, you become a landlord, and you need to know the basics to keep yourself out of trouble, first of all, right? How to take care of your tenants, rent collection, what you can and can't do, what options are available to if you don't pay. You don't want to go in blind. So one of the best places to find information on landlord-tenant laws is either just by, of course you can ask your agent, but you can Google, like I'm in Escambia County. If I Google Escambia County landlord-tenant laws, assuming that picks up the right state, it's going to take me to a website with Escambia County, and I know because I've been there, that will tell me a lot of the key factors. You can also look at best practices and stuff. Think about how you're going to collect rent and all that kind of thing. But first go with kind of the laws, and then go with the best practices while you're educating yourself. Now, the process from contract to close varies by city and state, so I'm just not going to get into that either at this point. We may dig into some more specifics later, but if you make it through the inspection period and you are headed on to closing, in addition to the landlord-tenant laws and kind of landlording best practices that I just mentioned, you'll want to think about rent collection. How are you going to collect rent? Because you may have prorated rent at closing, but at some point you're going to be in charge of collecting your rent. You also want to think about lease paperwork and have a lease in place. Either if you have a vacant unit, you're going to need to fill it and you're going to need a lease. If you have units where people are month to month, you may want to get them onto your lease. if you are going to hire a property manager, you want to interview them and do all of that before closing and let them take over on the day of. Okay, to summarize, connect with a good real estate agent, connect with a good lender, get pre-approved, set your criteria, analyze deals, negotiate, prepare to be a landlord, and finally, close on your house hack. I hope that learning about house hacking has shown you how easy it can be to get into real estate investing. I also hope that it's given you the confidence to go out and buy your first or your next deal.